Hi, my name is Shan and welcome back to the chaos that is Shani and Books. Today I am filming one of the most exciting videos of the year. I love watching these, but this is going to be my favourite books of 2022. I have put a lot of pressure on myself for no reason to get this list right or perfect, because I feel like it needs to be my best books, but then it also needs to like be representative of my reading taste. But then I just realized that's silly and I should just go for it and pick out the books that I think, and it is what it is. I did the same thing last year where I had like my top 5 and then I said that everything else on my list was a 6, but I separated it between like hyped books and underrated books. I don't know why I feel the need to like categorize things, which brings me to some honorable mentions, because I was almost gonna have this in my top book, but it's a graphic novel series and for some reason I had trouble ranking it in with the other books and categorizing it in with the fiction books. But the Saga graphic novel series is one of my favorite books, bless you, if not my favorite thing that I read this year, which is odd because it isn't anything like what I normally read. It's a sci-fi fantasy graphic novel series, so I'm throwing it in as an honorable mention because I reread the first 2 or 3 volumes and then I finished off the entire series that's out so far, and these are the bind-ups that are really heavy, so I'm going to put them down now. I'm going to fly through the other honorable mentions so this isn't a hideously long video. Also, it didn't quite make my top books, but I feel like I needed to mention it. Ancient Saints of Nothing, which would I have liked this as much if I was not a mixed race Filipino? Maybe not. This one is about a mixed race Filipino boy who lives in the US, and his cousin who lives in the Philippines ends up dying, and so he goes over to the Philippines to find out more about what happened to his cousin. This deals a lot with the war on drugs in the Philippines, and it's not often that I like young adult books anymore, so throwing this in there. Also, as an honorable mention, this one almost made my list, but I feel like I would need to reread it to be sure, but that is The Maid by Anita Prose, which is technically a mystery, but there's nothing groundbreaking or surprising really in the mystery. It's more, or I enjoyed it more because of the main character who reads as being neurodivergent, or I saw her as being that, which is why I didn't put it on the list, because as far as I'm aware the author isn't neurodivergent, and I feel like I would just need to reread it with fresh eyes and more knowledge. Yeah, I just didn't feel comfortable 100% putting this on my list, but I did want to mention it quickly. And then lastly, for my last 2 honorable mentions are 2 non-fiction that I enjoyed. The same thing happened last year. I had a lot of trouble, or I didn't put any non-fiction on my list because for some reason ranking non-fiction in with the fiction books seems odd to me. I don't know why. I think it's because, especially if it's a memoir, how can I rank someone's life against fictional stories? So this year I've chosen 1 non-fiction in my list, and I am going to put these other 2 in as honorable mentions. These 2 which are very popular books. This one everyone is talking about this year. It just recently came out. I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy, which is great. I'm sure you've all heard of it. And John Green's Essays, which I read at the beginning of the year and made me both laugh and cry. I really enjoyed it, but wasn't as good as the 1 non-fiction that I chose. Which brings me to my official top book, which I kind of ranked besides the non-fiction, because like I said, I can't rank this memoir in with fictional stories. It just feels odd, especially since this is one of the most amazing books that I have ever read in my life. It is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. By the way, you're gonna have to excuse Keen in the background talking to himself. There's nothing I can do about that. This is another one that I'm sure lots of you have heard of. This is Chanel Miller's memoir, and she was known as Emily Doe in a Stanford sexual assault case. Her victim impact statement went viral, which understandably, because reading it will make you cry. But this is her memoir reclaiming her identity, given she was known as Emily Doe, and now she's putting her name to that. Yeah, and she is telling her story. Chanel is clearly a very, very intelligent woman. The way she is able to articulate her thoughts and memories and emotions in a beautiful way and an extremely well written way, I could never. I was just highlighting huge passages within this book. I did start this in March and it took me until the end of the year to finish it, not due to any fault of the book. It is because it deals with very sensitive topics, and if you're not in the right headspace, then you just can't read it. it is an extremely difficult read given the subject matter, so tread with caution if you are wanting to go into this, especially if you are someone who has experienced sexual assault, or also if you have been someone who has supported someone through a trial and a legal battle and have to watch them relive their trauma. It is, yes, like I said, very difficult, but it is such an impactful read, and she's just so, like I said, just intelligent. Clearly, I was going to read some passages, but I would be here all day because I've highlighted so much in this book. But if it is something that you think you can read, then definitely go for it. So that is my one book that I'm not ranking because I can't rank her life. Okay, now into the actual fiction book. First up, one that surprised me. I picked this up randomly because one of my favorite used bookstores had it in stock, and I love supporting small Australian businesses. So I picked it up and I ended up reading it because it's kind of a short read. So towards the end of the year, I wanted some more reads to fly through. Hi! Thank you, baby. And you go and play with some toys?
Okay.
You're gonna do a drawing.
Okay.
But you're not. But this one is Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey, who I think is an Australian author. It says she lives in Sydney, I think. Yeah, she lives in Sydney. So this one is odd that it's made my list because when I read the synopsis, it didn't seem like, yeah. Beautiful. It didn't seem like something that I would like. It is set in a world where most of the wildlife on Earth has gone extinct, and it follows the main character Franny, who sets out to follow the very last Arctic terns on their migration to Antarctica. So we're switching between Franny in present day, where she's just talked her way to getting a crew of fishermen to let her on their boat so she can complete this task that she's been set out to do. And we're also getting flashbacks to the past, where we're finding out more about the secrets of her, I guess, tragic past. We're also getting to know the members of this crew and finding more about them. So hearing that synopsis, it doesn't sound like something that I would enjoy, and yet I really loved it. There's more going on than just this world where the animals are extinct. There's more than just the talk about the animals, while that does obviously play a part in it. There's just lots. Yes, Bobby. Do you want a different color? There is just lots of learning about. There is just lots of learning about these characters and their life, and I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. Next up, we have the one book that I don't own physically. I read it from the library, and I've yet to pick up a physical copy, but it is They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. Yes, baby? Wow. This one is a mystery thriller book, so I won't tell you too much about the synopsis because I feel like mysteries, it's nice to not know too much. But this one is following an English professor who murders people. So she chooses men who are just disgusting, who've done things like rape people and just be not great, and she meticulously plans their murder. She wipes her hands clean and she goes back to teaching and hasn't been caught for any of these murders. And now she's about to take on her biggest one yet, I guess. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I feel like a lot of people did, and for me personally, it definitely did live up to the hype. And this was one of the books where I got to the twist and then I literally flipped back the page to be like, wait, did I read that right? And reread the page and went, oh my gosh. Next up, another book. A lot of these books I read at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. There's not that many in the middle. So there's some of these books that you probably have never heard me speak about. Some have been in reading vlogs. This has been in a reading vlog. So this one is Watch Over Me by Nina Lakua, which is, I think, technically a young adult book, which is another surprise. This one follows Mila. I'm guessing that's how you say that name, Mila, who has aged out of the foster care system, and she gets a job on a farm to teach young students, and the owners of this farm have fostered many children, and the children that are on the farm that she's teaching are also children that have been fostered. So she's excited to start her job and I guess be part of a family again. But the farm is also a haven for ghosts. This is really atmospheric and lyrical, and it really discusses grief and how it feels to be set free from it, and about how the family we choose can make us really feel like we belong. And I thought this was really, really beautiful. Next up, we have Taboo by Kim Scott. This one is an Indigenous Australian authored book, which I've not read enough of in 2022. Definitely need to read more this year. I think in 2021 there was like 4 Aboriginal Australian books on my favorites list, but this is the only one this year, but it's fine because it was good. This is one, it actually has quite low ratings on Goodreads, so I think it must be one that doesn't work for everyone. But so it is set in this rural southwest town, I think, in Western Australia, and we follow this group of Indigenous Australians who are returning back to the taboo place, which is why the name of the book is called that. And it's taboo because it was a site of a massacre decades ago where a huge group of these Aboriginal Australians were murdered after a white man raped a young Aboriginal girl. So obviously be cautious because this does deal with a lot of very dark and heavy topics. So they're invited back to the site by the elderly white man who now owns this farm that the massacre was on, and he is doing so because he wants to fulfill his late wife's dying wish to try and cleanse the moral stain from the farm that their family had been living on for many years. That's the general, I guess, synopsis. Like I said, it deals with some very dark and heavy topics, but it also has very dreamy, poetic writing, which I believe, reading some of the reviews, is what a lot of people didn't like about it. It does have a very specific writing style, and I did see in reviews that people said that it took a while to actually get used to this author's style of writing. But personally, I checked out the audiobook from my library and listened while I was following along physically, which is my favorite way to read things currently. Maybe that really helped me to not have a problem with the writing style because I was having it read to me while I was reading with my eyes. So maybe do that if you're worried about the same thing. Hi puppy. I would also recommend the audio book because there is some of the Noongar language written in the book, which this does have a focus on language. I think in the afterword it does talk about this a lot. I would recommend reading that, but it does say that it is endangered and listed as extinct until 2009, and then it was updated back to living in 2015, and elsewhere has been written as threatened. And so the author does talk a lot about that. Obviously there is a lot of discussion about treatment of Aboriginal Australians throughout history. Okay, I've been interrupted by my son like 10 times now, so I'm gonna have to move on. Thankfully, next up is a book that I probably won't have to talk about too much, but this was actually my first book of 2022 that I read, and I of course loved it. It is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Like I said, I probably don't have to say too much about this one because it is very popular. Okay, I apologize if anything is different lighting or setup wise, but it's a while later and being a mum is just having to multitask. I think I was talking about Gone Girl, which is basically this husband wakes up and his wife is missing. It's their 5th wedding anniversary and she's just gone, and the police are suspecting him, and all this stuff is coming out and he's denying it, and it's like, what's going on? And yes, this is obviously hugely popular, and I had been putting it off for a while because I had seen the movie quite a while ago, probably when it first came out. So I was trying to put off reading the book until like a lot of the details of the movie was maybe gone out of my head. I did, however, still remember the main big twist in it, and I still found the book enjoyable. So if you're like me and you've seen the movie, or if you've been spoiled for the book and you think you're not going to enjoy it because you know what the twist is, just know that the book can still be enjoyable even though I knew the main plot twist. So, and following on from that, another book from the same author that I read directly after that one is The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. This one is super short. It is, I think, categorized as horror, but it's obviously a little novella, and I really enjoyed this. This is following a woman who is struggling to make ends meet. She is working at a place reading auras and kind of just doing a bit of fraud as she's claiming to be a psychic, and this rich woman comes in and she's asking her to cleanse her house. And so our main character thinks that this is just going to be a bit of easy money. She'll go in, you know, pretend she's doing whatever to cleanse this woman's house, and yeah, that's the main plot of the story. And then obviously weird things start going on at the house, and I thought this was really fun. And I also feel like maybe I just really enjoy like short weird horror, because a few months before this I read The Patient by Jasper DeWitt, and that's like a short weird book that I feel like has similar vibes, and I loved that also. That almost made my favorites of like last year. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. And obviously it's a quick read. It's like, what, 60 pages? I probably need to read more from Gillian Flynn. I can see why she's popular. Next up, this is a book that may have made my list because my experience made it extra good, but it is Ghost by Dolly Alderton. If you saw my reading vlog, I read this on my birthday because I was looking for a book that was set on someone's birthday or had something to do with the birthday, and the first chapter is her birthday and then the last chapter is her birthday the following year. So that's why I picked this, but I was pleasantly surprised because I feel like I haven't seen anyone talk about this before, and I picked it up at a used bookstore just on a whim randomly because I thought it looked cute. So I think my reading experience on my birthday, I read it all in the one day, plus the fact that I was surprised by it maybe enhanced my enjoyment, my thinking of how much I enjoyed it. I don't know, but it's on my list regardless. This one is following Nina, who is in her 30s. She's confident, she's independent, and she's a successful author. Can't even talk. But societal pressure to find a man and have babies has pushed her to signing up to a dating app, and she meets a man. He tells her that he's gonna marry her on the first date, and they fall in love, but months later he ghosts her. That's like the main gist of the book. So I think, yeah, reading this at the perfect time and may have contributed to the high rating. It was pretty funny, and there were a lot of quotes that, you can't see those, but there were a lot of quotes that I highlighted and related to. While it is funny, it did deal with a lot of other issues. The father had recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, so his mental state is declining throughout the book, which is obviously very stressful for her. Her mother also has a not great response to this diagnosis of her husband, so she's dealing with her mother as well. She is having a strained relationship with a childhood friend that talks about, you know, obviously Nina's in her 30s, she's single and childless, and she has a lot of friends who are married with children. I guess they are growing apart. She also has a relationship with her ex that they are still friends, so she's dealing with that relationship too. She also has a weird toxic relationship with her neighbor. So really this is just talking about being in your 30s and talking about relationships, family, living, and yeah, it was really funny and fun. Okay, I'm literally just guessing at my order now. I'm picking up random things and I'm getting stressed that I'm not putting them in the correct order, but it's fine. Next up, I'm going to talk about Nightcrawling by Layla Motley. This one I just also picked up randomly recently. It wasn't a vlog, but I don't know if I'm ever going to post that, so we'll see. This one follows our main character, Kiara. She and her brother are barely scraping by. Both have dropped out of high school and are living on their own due to their family kind of being torn apart and their parents being gone due to death and prison. So they're living in this apartment complex, and her brother is not really helping financially because he's hell-bent on this dream of becoming a famous rapper. So Kiara goes out on the hunt for a job in order to be able to pay their bills for them, but she's also trying to support a little 9-year-old boy who is their neighbor in the apartment complex because his mother has abandoned him. So one night, a drunken misunderstanding kind of leads her into a career path within the sex work industry, and she finds herself in the center of a massive scandal within the police department. And that aspect is kind of based around true events. This is a debut and it's written by a 17-year-old, which is crazy because I could not write a book when I was 17. And I did see a lot of reviews saying that they thought that the writing reflected the fact that she was 17 and they didn't like the writing. So it being described as like overwritten and that it used too many metaphors and was like overly descriptive. But like the other book, Taboo, that I was talking about that had the same negative reviews, it seems that I don't mind that type of writing and maybe I prefer it. I think this was also nominated for like the Booker Prize or something this year. I don't really remember. It doesn't say on the front of my copy. But yeah, I sobbed reading this book. I cried so much. Maybe this one's not for everyone, but it's definitely for me. And look up the trigger warnings for this one as well because there's a lot. Next up is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. If you watch my favorites last year, a Tiffany D. Jackson book was in, I think, my number 2 spot. So I clearly love this author. This one I think was inspired by the allegations of the abuse that, what was that? What's his name? R. Kelly. I believe it was inspired by that. So obviously it deals with very heavy topics again. Seems to be a theme in my favorite. So this one is dealing with grooming and sexual assault, as well as emotional manipulation. So the premise of this story is a famous R&B artist named Corey Fields spots our main character Enchanted Jones at an audition, and then he sweeps her away with these promises that he's going to make her famous and she's going to get the singing career that she wants. But Corey has a controlling dark side, and after he winds up dead, the signs are pointing to it being Enchanted who is responsible. That's not a spoiler, by the way, that's in the synopsis, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it is. But yes, this obviously it deals with a lot, because I believe that Enchanted in this story is under 18. She's must be 17, and I forget how old he is, but he's definitely late 20s, maybe even early 30s, I can't really remember. So again, obviously be aware before going in to this book, but I just really enjoyed it. I guess it feels weird saying the word enjoy when you're talking about a book that has such heavy topics, but so far everything that I've read from Tiffany D. Jackson has been great. Well, it's been only 2 books, but yes, I would definitely recommend picking this one up. Next up, I don't think I've ever spoken about this book on my channel. I don't think I vlogged it, but it is The Guncle by Stephen Rowley. And this one, like a year ago, I saw a friend of mine on Instagram post a picture of it, and I'd never seen it before, and I messaged her and said, is it called The Guncle because it's about a gay uncle? And when she said yes, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get that. We have a close friend who is not related to us, but because he's so close, he refers to himself as my son's Guncle because he is gay. So I knew I wanted to pick this up from the title alone, and I was pleasantly surprised with how much I loved it. Apparently it's popular though, because it does have an as loved on TikTok sticker, but I wouldn't know, I'm not on TikTok, or I am, but I just never go there. But anyway, this book follows Patrick, who is a gay man, and after a family tragedy, ends up taking in his niece and nephew, who are like 9 and 6, I think. And the story is about dealing with grief, which I'm noticing seems to be a theme in this favorites, and about how the grief never really leaves you, about finding love, finding family, and about the idea that adults can learn from kids maybe more than kids can learn from adults. Although this does deal with grief, like I said, it is hilarious. I think this is one of the first books, one of the very few books in which I've literally laughed out loud. Like, there are books that are funny and I'm like, oh, that's funny while I'm reading, but like this book actually made me make the laughing noise out loud, and it did also make me cry. The children in this were so sweet. I feel like the book definitely portrayed exactly what young children at ages like 6 and 9 are like, with just the questions and just the fresh innocent mind where they're just seeing the world for the first time. If you're someone who doesn't really like kids, then this isn't going to be the book for you, because the children in this book is part of what made me love it so much. I just think they are the sweetest little things, and yeah, the book really spoke about the idea of when do you stop being a kid, like when is the moment where you stopped being a kid. But yes, if you're looking for something that's really feel good and talks about finding happiness in really tough times, then definitely recommend this one. It was so sweet. Okay, next up I think I'm gonna go with 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. Very odd that I have enjoyed some romance this year, who am I? But this was so good. This follows the main character Eva. She is a single mom and she's a best-selling like erotica novel author. And our other main character is Shane, who is very reclusive, and he is an award-winning literary author. And we find out that these 2 characters had spent a week together when they were teenagers in love, which was 20 years in the past. And since then, they have been secretly writing to each other through their novels. If that doesn't make you want to read this book, so cute, so cute. But yes, it is romance, but it also deals with heavy topics. I feel like personally for me, I need more than just the romance. In a romance book, there needs to be other things going on, but this also portrays the main character Eva with her chronic migraines. So I can't personally speak to that representation, but from what I've seen, that is very accurately done of a chronic illness. Also deals with topics of self-harm and drug use, so be aware of that if that is going to be something that will affect your reading. But yes, if you're looking for a romance that is less light and fluffy but still a very cute romance but dealing with extra topics, then pick up this one. Next up, a very hyped book. So I should have known that it was going to be good. Everyone's talking about it, everyone loves it. Is Finley Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. Super hyped at this point, so it doesn't need me to probably give you the synopsis, but this was such a fun time. I absolutely flew through it, and I'm definitely going to be reading the rest of the series, which is odd for me because I never read series. But if you didn't know, this is following Finley, who is a single mum, and she is, I guess, like a barely known author. She's a new author, and she's struggling to make ends meet. Again, a trend I think I'm seeing in this stack. But in the beginning of the book, she has a crazy morning with her kids trying to get them ready. We have a bad haircut, a big breakfast mess that is involving syrup, a knife, duct tape, and some blood. But she ends up getting out of the house and heading off to a meeting with her agent in order to discuss her newest book. A woman at a nearby table then sees the remnants of her breakfast fiasco in her bag, namely the knife and the blood. And while she overhears Finley telling her agent a synopsis of the plot of her new book, the woman assumes that Finley is not an author, but that her book idea about murder is actually her life that she's describing. So she tries to hire her to get rid of a person, a problem, for good. So yeah, she tries to hire Finley to murder someone, and it's just so funny. It really reminded me of the TV show Good Girls, if you've seen that. That's also about mums who accidentally stumble into being involved in some crimes, which I don't think I'm caught up on that show. I think I have like 2 whole seasons to catch up on. But anyway, this felt like that. So if you like that TV show, then you might like this. But it was so much fun, and I definitely agree with all the hype that this has been getting. Next up is a controversial one because I don't think that everyone liked this book, but it worked for me, which is super odd considering. Anyway. But it is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby, which I'm very surprised that I enjoyed this one. But anyway, this one is following one black father and one white father. Both of them are ex-cons, and they each had a son, and the sons weren't married. The sons have been murdered, and now the 2 dads are on a quest for vengeance for their sons. Both dads never really fully accepted their son's sexuality, and obviously devastated by the loss of their sons, they set out to try and do better by them in death than they did in life. This to me felt like a Quentin Tarantino movie, and it went by so fast I could barely put it down. One morning after reading it, I had woken up and I was like all like still groggy from waking up, and I was thinking to myself, like I could picture this one scene in my head, and I was thinking to myself, oh, what was that really good movie that I'd watched? I should rewatch that. And then as I woke up, I realized it was not a movie. It was a scene from this book that was playing in my head so vividly that I thought it was from a movie that I'd watched. So I think things like that really helped this book to launch itself into my favorites, which is so odd considering the nature of this book. It is very graphic. There is a lot of graphic violence. They are 2 ex-cons, and unlike the last book, which is very funny and fluffy with the murder, this was the total opposite. And yet somehow I loved it. And somehow I was rooting for 2 homophobic men, one of which being racist. I don't know how the book made me feel for these 2 people, but it did. And I definitely understand where people are coming from. People didn't like it. The fact, I think, that they were not accepting of their sons when they were alive, and now they are trying to, I guess, be heroes, even though, you know, when they were alive they weren't, you know. But I don't know, for me, I just really enjoyed my reading experience, and I haven't stopped thinking about this book, and I think I read it in February, so I couldn't not mention it because it was such a good reading experience for me personally. And also I'm so shocked because of how graphic it was. How did I like this book? I don't know. Now we are at my top book, which I'm still questioning whether this is my top book, but you know, I've filmed now and we're at the end, so it has to be. But simply because of the genre, which is romance. I know, I'm shocked too. But I read this at the end of the year and I flew through it in like a day and I absolutely loved it. But it is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This one follows Alexis, who is a sophisticated city girl, and she's under a lot of pressure from her parents, who are ultra wealthy, and they have this giant family tradition of being these world-renowned surgeons, and they have this legacy going at the hospital, so she's under pressure to continue that for them. And the main character is Daniel, who is 10 years younger than her, and he is from this cute little small town. He also has some family legacies to continue, and on the way back from a funeral, I believe it is, Alexis ends up in the small town and Daniel helps her out, and the story goes from there. Obviously it's a romance, but they come from 2 completely different worlds, and so Alexis doesn't think that there is any way that the two of them are going to be able to fit into each other's life. But oh my goodness, this book, again, this is another one that made me both laugh and cry multiple times throughout. But just seeing Alexis grow and start to find happiness, because we throughout the book learn about some of the trauma in her past, so it was so lovely to see her find happiness. I also loved the small town. I, like a lot of other people, love a small town setting, and this town was so cute, and I really enjoyed hearing from a lot of the side characters that live in the small town, and I was really rooting for them all. But yes, I think a lot of people enjoyed this book, but I think what helped me enjoy it extra more is that I related to a lot of aspects in the book, which I won't get into, but yeah, some parts were difficult for me to read, but overall it was a really happy reading experience, and I would definitely recommend this one to anyone who's interested in picking up a romance, because I do think this is going to make other people's favorites lists, and the fact that a romance is at the top of my favorite list, I'm still shocked by. So, and there we have it. I think that is my top 15 books of the year, plus some honourable mentions. I don't know what's wrong with my brain that I can't find a way to incorporate graphic novels and non-fiction within the list, but it's fine. We got there in the end. I think I'm overall happy with the books that I chose and saying that these are my favorites. Let me know if you have read any of these books, or if you're planning to read any of these books, and let me know what your favorite books of the year are. I am so looking forward to seeing everyone's favorites videos. I've started watching some, but I'm so excited to see the rest of them. Favorites videos are just the most exciting time for me, and I'm now preparing a huge TBR to read from other people's favorites videos. So let's hope that 2023 is an excellent reading year for all, and hopefully I will be back with some more content soon. If you weren't aware, having a child does make filming very difficult, but we make do. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much, especially if you've made it to the end of this, what I assume to be a long video. But yes, I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.